Good evening, everyone. I hope you're all happy and healthy. It's the night before Soul Calibur. I'm sure we're all super excited about trying that game tomorrow. I'm going to be playing it here on the channel, probably just spending a lot of time in practice mode trying to home in on a main character for that game. So far, I'm most interested in trying out Sungmina, so I'm going to look at her first. But for now, I was sitting around today just reading YouTube comments, and I remember thinking, man, people really seem to hate Noctis. So I thought about that for a while, and I realized that I kind of hate Noctis too, or I dislike playing against him, I should say. I think we all have characters that frustrate us when we play against them in this game, but with Noctis kind of uniquely, I'm never excited when I win against him. I'm just kind of glad that it's over so that I can move on and hopefully play against somebody else. And that's not how I feel about other characters that I don't like. For example, we make a lot of jokes about Brian on this channel, but when I have to play against Brian, that usually means that I'm actually focusing extra hard because I want to win. But with Noctis, I just kind of want to get away from him, if you know what I mean. So it seems like a lot of people feel this way about the character, and it's kind of unique. I have never met somebody who's like a dedicated Noctis main who just loves this character and wants to be great with him. Although I'm sure you're out there, you obviously exist, at least in theory, and if you are watching this video, then I'm sorry. You should obviously not worry about bullies. You should play what you love and never let anybody tell you how to enjoy your favorite video games. But maybe it can be an interesting video for you because you're going to have to get used to the fact that people don't necessarily respect your character choice all that much, let's say. I'm going to start by saying that I think this whole situation is so unfortunate because I was so excited about Noctis when he was first revealed. You'll remember that when we looked at the trailers, I was happy because it's the first time, it was the first time in a while in Tekken 7 where we got a new character who didn't carry these meter bar mechanics with them from another game. He's just kind of a typical Tekken character with launchers, spin moves, pokes. So it's the first new character in a while that I was excited in actually trying out. And so he came out, we did a little series on him, I did a guide, played him to about Vanquisher, and then I kind of left the character after about a week, and I haven't really played him ever since. But since then, my opinion of the character has gotten worse and worse and worse, until now in Season 2, where I'm kind of feeling like I would prefer if he wasn't around at all. And that's very sad. Let's start talking about the positive things about the design of Noctis before I go into what I really want to talk about. I think, I mean, one thing I said back then is I thought his character design had a lot of focus. And I stand by that. He has a lot of focus. He has very good, I mean, uniquely good whiff punishment. So it seems to be something that he should theoretically specialize in. That doesn't really happen. We're going to talk about why. But one move that people were very worried about is this move right here, 4-2, the shift break. Because this is an extremely fast full-screen projectile that is a safe mid. So, I mean, it's crazy unique. How do you balance something like this? And they actually did a very good job. It's extremely clever. So what happens when this move gets blocked is it forces Noctis to teleport next to his opponent at a frame disadvantage. So that means that the move can be safe and Noctis can attempt it without killing himself, but when it gets blocked, it puts him at a very necessary disadvantage, and that's a very clever way of balancing a move like this. And so it's just a good job by the developers. I also feel like Noctis is sort of unique because he has such trivial execution. I mean, he's such an easy character to execute with. There are some difficult things you can do, obviously. I mean, there are with all characters, but if you want to like do clutch jabs into this for an ender and stuff, timing that perfectly can be hard. I'm not trying to knock that out of the hands of people who are good Noctis players, but he is literally a character where you can launch and press 4-2 and then just spam 2 as fast as you can and get full complete combos with decent damage, built-in wall carry. And you don't have to move, dash, sidestep. You don't even have to time anything. You can just literally keep on pressing 2 as fast as you can, and the combos are gonna happen. So like the execution is very trivial, and that's kind of fine. I don't have any problem with low execution characters in this game. I honestly kind of prefer to play them personally. I mean, I'm a Miguel player. Very easy to use, hopefully has a little bit more depth than Noctis, but he's not, you don't have to do anything difficult with your hands to play Miguel, so that's fine. It's also necessary because Noctis is a Final Fantasy guest character, which is important to think about. There's probably very little overlap between people who love JRPGs and who are into like the music and the story of a game like that and people who play high-level competitive fighting games. We're excuse me, we're two very different breeds of video game player, right? So If you're coming to Tekken because you love Final Fantasy and you want to play Noctis, and he has to do like electrics and stuff to be able to function, then by the time you've learned any of that, you're probably giving up on the game. So he necessarily needs to be very, very easy to use, and it's fine, and he is, and that's cool. So I don't have any problem with any of that. I think there are a lot of things to like about his design. I like some of his counter hit moves are cool. This unique cool low that's very powerful was buffed now, but it's kind of fine. I would love to have a move like this on some of my characters. There are things to like that feel very Tekken-y about him. But then that all sort of falls out of the window and by the wayside because people who play him online tend to gravitate against or towards one very specific, one very annoying playstyle that is so unreasonably effective that it just seems to consume most people who play the character. And I'm talking about three moves, specifically three moves that just happen over and over and over again, kind of set up and complement one another in an unreasonably effective way. And I'm talking about the down back 2, the running 1+2, and the down back 1+2. And I'm going to talk about these moves more in depth and what I mean in a little bit, but you probably sort of know where I'm going with this. And I'm not trying to say that there aren't really good Noctis players out there. There must be. I mean, I've run into a couple online, I guess, but there are probably people out there who could completely destroy me in this game who are very good with this character. But the majority of people you run into seem to sort of get stuck in doing this move and the running 1+2 over and over because it just works a little better than it should. Now, I'm going to say here, first of all, that I'm not trying to call this character overpowered or call these moves overpowered. Noctis is actually not that powerful of a character. He's not terrible, but he's not high tier or overpowered. That's not what I mean when I say the moves are unreasonably effective. There are ways of dealing with them, and when you do, you can actually kill Noctis in return. That makes him a lot weaker. A problem being that when you want to deal with these moves properly, you have to do kind of specific, difficult, and finicky things as the opponents. And so what is happening is that the opponent is kind of having a constant heart attack and stressing out because they have to sort of do these specific finicky little things to try and get through. It's like dancing through a maze of laser beams. Meanwhile, the opponent is just kind of rotating 3 buttons and playing this brain-dead version of Tekken, a 3-button Tekken. And I think in that space, neither person is enjoying the game very much, and it's not like you're having a dynamic and interesting game of Tekken, because one person is kind of just throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks, and the other person is just trying to dodge the spaghetti. It's not very interesting. Okay, so let's talk about the moves and specifically what creates this unfortunate little situation here. I think we should start with down back 2. Down back 2 is an extremely powerful launcher, and when this does hit, it's going to do very high damage, and that's important to note. It's not a trivial move to get hit by, and so when it is used as part of a mix-up, you have to be very careful because you don't want to mess up and get hit by this. It's not just any mid. It's a very, very powerful, class 1 launcher. This is minus 16 on block, but it has such a massive amount of pushback that it's almost never going to get punished. You can see that the pushback is very large here, especially when it hits a tip range. You can see the massive pushback right there. Very few characters who can do anything about punishing that on block. So most of the time when the move gets applied, it gets applied as though it were a completely safe move. Especially effective for Oki. It hits people on the ground, and if they try to get up crouching or get up wrong somehow, and they get hit by this in a standing state, then they get launched. If they stay on the ground, it's just a massive damage ground hitting move. So if you think about other sweeping ground hitting mids like this, for example, down 3+4 from Josie, steel pedal kind of moves, up back 4 from Katarina, down 3+4 from Miguel, for example, those moves exist. They are like a powerful knockdown mid when they hit a croucher, and they can hit an opponent on the ground, and so they cover 2 options for Oki, meaning that they're very powerful for Oki. But those moves, if we talk for example about Miguel's down 3+4, that's a knockdown mid that's maybe going to give you a wall splat. That's very different from a massive class 1 launcher that is going to send you across half the screen for 70 damage. Should also be noted that when you do get Miguel's down 3+4 blocked, that's actually a launch punishable move in Season 2, whereas this move most of the time is something Noctis completely gets away with. So it's an extremely powerful Oki tool. It has that property where it's a mid that covers both grounded and crouching, but it's also more powerful than other moves in that sort of class. If you stay on the ground and try and roll to the side and get away from this with some other sort of get-up option, it's extremely difficult. This is very oppressive when you're on the ground, and it's something that you constantly have to be on the lookout for. The next move we need to talk about here is the running 1+2. Okay, so the thing about the running 1+2 is this is what you're going to be using when you're sort of pressuring people on the ground from a little bit of a range most of the time at the end of a combo where you've knocked somebody away, or maybe when you're just closing the gap. It's one of those running moves that is going to give you plus frames on block. It gives you plus 11, I think, currently, which is obviously big. You don't get anything guaranteed. But it is a move that is very, very powerful on hit and block, and it's very good for Oki because it has that property again of killing people on the ground and killing people who are crouching or getting up in some sort of way that isn't working. Now, the way you're supposed to deal with this move, the way they've intended for this move to be balanced, is that it's linear, and so you're supposed to move sideways around this move. You're also probably supposed to move sideways around this move, and this is how you're supposed to deal with them, with the unreasonable effectiveness of them. Problem being that trying to sidestep and sidewalk these moves is a little bit like playing the lottery right now. It's not consistent enough where it really works. If you want to sidestep this move consistently really well, you have to be so close to your opponent that you're standing about right here, and when you're that close to the opponent, they're not using this move. They're using this move when you're spaced out or when you're all on the ground most of the time. But you can still do it. It definitely can happen, especially with this move. It's a little bit easier to do, but it's something that is so specific for when you have to time it, what range you have to be at, that some of the time you're just randomly gonna not get the evade. You're not gonna fully dodge it. You're gonna get hit, and when you mess it up, you get launched by a massive launcher, and you've lost half the round. These are, like I'm saying, they're not trivial mids to get hit by. They're not your average mix-up tools. They're such powerful launchers, right? So if you're the opponent in this case, you know that Noctis is going to do this move, and you usually do. I mean, if you're watching this, be honest, when this move comes out, you've usually predicted it by about 3 seconds. You know when it's going to come out, and you know they're supposed to sidestep it, but instead of attempting to do that properly, and if you do, great, you get a launch and you can kill your opponent. But if you mess that up, you're going to get launched by such a powerful move that it's kind of uneconomic to do. It's kind of better to just block and not risk getting launched, just trying to get on with the match and get out of the situation by blocking, meaning that Noctis again gets away with murder. You don't want to risk getting hit by this move. It's not a it's not consistent enough when you're trying to evade it that it works as a countermeasure to the move. So what you do is that you keep on standing where you are, you block it a lot of the time, and then he gets the plus frames, meaning that he's now going to mix you up. And what is he going to use for the mix-up? Well, he's going to use these 2 other moves that we've already talked about. So again, the synergy between the moves is also a little bit problematic. One way I deal with this running 1+2 right now is that I just armor through it. I have the good fortune of playing characters who have good sort of long extended hitbox armor moves, like back 4 from Miguel, forward 1+2 from Elisa, and when you do predict it, then you can go through it and you can knock the opponent down. You can knock this down, and then you can run up and you can try and stay on top of him where he can't use these moves. And one thing you will notice happen when you get through the barrier that this massive sword creates against Noctis, and you're standing on top of him and you're forcing him to play sort of poke heavy up close Tekken, is that they usually break down because they're not used to having to do that. They're used to doing this and this and this a lot and not having to think that much about other things. It's also something that Noctis isn't very good at. Playing up here, he has kind of shitty lows and stuff, so that's what I do. If you don't have good armor moves, then I'm sorry, you can't do that strategy. Your best option then is to try and jab him out of it, which works. When he's in the air right there, you can jab and get a partial combo. But again, if you're, like, for example, a Miguel player and you're sitting on T-Rex arms, that can be inconsistent, and when you mess it up, you're gonna get launched by this super big launcher. And it's one of the most frustrating things that can happen when you are predicting something. You are doing the thing that is supposed to deal with that perfectly, and then you're the one who's getting launched. That's, I mean, you usually get launched for messing up in Tekken, but that's a very unreasonable situation, I think, when the opponent is really making mistakes and just playing kind of, very simple 3-button Tekken, and here you are trying to, be a ninja and stuff, and you're just getting launched for your troubles. I think that's where a lot of the frustration about the character comes in. Now, this wouldn't be as much of a problem because it really is an Oki problem for the most part if Noctis didn't have an easy time knocking you down, and he didn't really have that previously. He didn't have, a very simple to use move that just caused an effective knockdown. Until Season 2, where they all of a sudden turned one of these 3 moves into a knockdown low, right? This didn't used to knock down like this, and so it's just the worst thing that could have happened if you're a player who already dislikes Noctis, because now he's going to hit you with this, and then you're in the mixer, and then he's just going to, you're in the blender, and these moves are just going to happen over and over. This thing into this thing, this thing into that thing. Both of those things into that thing, and then when that gets blocked and you're in the mix situation, then again it's this thing into this thing again. It's just a nightmare. They've also made it so that this forward 1+2 is guaranteed in most get-up situations. The opponent can go under this follow-up forward 1+2 here by staying completely on the ground. The way to deal with this spear is to stay on the ground, but as we've already discussed, the entire problem with Noctis' Oki situation is that you can't stay on the ground because all of the effective moves that we've talked about so far murder people who stay on the ground. So it's just kind of a perfect shitstorm in a lot of ways. Now, this low is 24 frames to come out, which means that it is just in the seeable range, sort of. And again, this is where we're talking about the character isn't overpowered. If you're focused, you can react to this, and when you do, you can launch punish it. But it's in that range where it's difficult to see and difficult to react to. This move is supposed to be sidesteppable, but it's difficult to sidestep. It's difficult to time it perfectly. It's difficult to react to this consistently. And so it's not that your opponent is doing super deep mix-ups that are difficult to deal with. There's no mind game. Let's put it that way. There's no mind game. It's, do you have the reflexes and the reaction speed to sort of get through this shitstorm, and the opponent is just trying to kind of maintain the shitstorm, and it's not that much fun to play against, right? This is also like a counter hit launcher and stuff. I don't know if it still has that property. But this low is a little bit too fast, honestly. I mean, if you want it to be a big, powerful knockdown low, kind of like the class of low where you're talking about, like down back 4 from Elisa, for example, or Elisa, I should say, the robot girl, not the vampire girl, I honestly think that it should be a little bit slower still than what it is, but then again it becomes unreasonably crappy when you're playing offline against focused, competitive players. So I don't know, it's just the moves individually don't really bother me that much. It's just that they have so much synergy and are so finicky to deal with that you know that you can deal with them, but you're not necessarily going to be able to do it, and that's where you end up with players just doing this over and over. One thing that usually happens when I run into Noctis online is that the opponent will start out trying to play better. They will poke a lot, they will try to move sideways, trying backdash, looking for whiffs and whatever, but then as soon as they get in a sticky situation, they're losing, they're at a life disadvantage, it's the final round, and they just kind of sigh, give up, and then they start rotating these moves, and then the opponent sighs and sort of feels like giving up as well. And that's I think why this design is unfortunate. There are a lot of characters who are annoying to play against in this game, but I think Noctis is the only the only character where both players are kind of just trying to get through it as fast as possible so that they can move on and do something more interesting with their time. But that's only my interpretation of the situation, and I know it's a little bit strongly worded, and I'm not trying to be negative here, I'm trying to be constructive, because I spent a lot of time today trying to learn more about how to play against Noctis in practice mode, practicing the timing of the side steps and all the rest of it, and I've gotten better at it. So I just wanted to share some of that experience and talk a little bit about that situation. I hope the video was reasonably enjoyable, and if you are a Noctis main out there, then more power to you. I think you probably agree with a lot of the things I've said, and I think you're probably frustrated about people who play like that too, because you're probably trying to do more and be more. You're probably using some of the more interesting, moves that he has, stuff like this, stuff like his parry, his counter hit tools, the stuff that are the moves that are pretty cool. Maybe you're even using, back turn and crazy stuff like that. Who knows? Anyway, that's the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you leave your comments. Let me know what you think about the character. Now I'm gonna try and get some sleep because I have a long work day ahead of me tomorrow, and then I'm gonna come home and then I'm gonna be playing some Soul Calibur, and I'm really looking forward to that. So thank you so much for watching this one, guys. I'll see you guys again very soon.